You need to pay attention to where you fish, because sometimes you're not the only thing waiting to be caught. Sometimes the water is waiting to catch you. There are certain sounds you just never forget. Not the sounds of a car crash or a siren, but the kind of sound that doesn't belong. The sound that feels like it's scraping the inside of your skull and setting up camp there forever. For my older brother David and me, that sound is a shriek that echoes off the cold black surface of a secluded lake, followed by the chilling ripple of the water closing over something that was never supposed to be there. We had a ritual, David and I, something we did for years, and it was always the same. Every Friday night, once the sun had completely dipped behind the tree line, we'd load up his old pickup with gear, 2 6-packs of cheap beer, and a little tin of bait we kept in the garage that smelled exactly like every memory we ever shared. The destination was always the same too. North Shore Lake. It wasn't a fancy place. No docks, no signs, just a beat-up dirt road that only locals knew about, ending at a small, uneven patch of gravel where you could launch a rowboat. The trees were dense there, like thick black walls, and the water itself always looked darker, colder, more secretive than any other body of water I'd ever seen. But that's exactly why we loved it. It was quiet. It was ours. It was normal. If you grew up with a brother who was also your best friend, you know the rhythm of things. We didn't need to talk much. We just sit there in the boat, drifting maybe 30 yards from the shore, the fishing line taut and waiting, listening to the crickets and the sound of David sipping his beer. We'd been doing this since we were kids, since David was big enough to paddle and I was just small enough to keep quiet and watch the stars. It was our sanctuary. But that night, the air felt wrong. It was late September, so it was already cold, but there was a strange stillness, a total lack of wind that made the darkness feel heavy, like a suffocating blanket. We had been out there for maybe 2 hours, and neither of us had gotten so much as a nibble. That itself was weird. This lake was known for a few good catches, even late in the season. David kept sighing, pulling his line in, and casting it out again with a frustration that was unusual for him. He was the patient one. I was just staring at the far side of the lake, where the tree line was the thickest and the shadows were so absolute they seemed to swallow the dim moonlight. That's when I saw it. I need you to understand how still the water was. It was like black glass. You could practically see the reflection of the few stars that managed to shine through the heavy air. So when I saw a ripple, it wasn't some little fish jumped close to the boat. It was a ripple that started way, way over on the opposite shore, near where the water was deepest and the trees grew right down to the edge. It was a slow, deliberate ring of movement on the surface, moving outwards, perfectly circular like a pebble had been dropped. I didn't say anything right away, I just thought it was some big fish, maybe a snapping turtle, something that had been under the surface for a long time and was finally moving. But then a second ripple formed, then a third, and they were all coming from the exact same spot. It was like something massive was slowly, painfully pushing its way up through the water. It wasn't violent. It was patient. Too patient. That was the first thing that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. That unsettling feeling of something being completely unbothered by the physics of water. I nudged David with my elbow. He was looking down at his reel. "Hey! Look over there!" He didn't rush. He slowly turned his head to follow my gaze to the far shore. And he saw it too. His eyes narrowed, and I saw his grip tighten on his fishing rod. That was the thing about David. He was a very calm guy. But when he saw something genuinely out of place, you could see the switch flip, the part of his brain that went from casual fishing to full alert. The water was still moving, the ripples widening across the lake. The source of the movement was now clearer. It wasn't just coming from the water. It was emerging from it. A shape. At first it looked like a rock, a dark, featureless mass pushing up. David actually mumbled, "Did the water level drop? I don't remember that rock being there." But the shape kept rising. Then a head broke the surface. She came up so slowly, so perfectly vertical, that she didn't make a sound beyond those initial ripples. She just rose. The water clung to her, dripping off her in sheets, but she didn't seem to notice the freezing temperature of the lake at all. We could see her clearly now, even with the distance in the dark. The moon, as if on cue, suddenly seemed to shine a little brighter, illuminating the far shore just enough. She was beautiful, in a way that felt wrong. Her hair was long and black, plastered to her head and shoulders, and her skin was pale, almost translucent in the faint moonlight. She was wearing what looked like a simple white dress, completely soaked and clinging to her, but it didn't look like it had been damaged by the water or by time. It looked clean, newly drenched. The way she held herself, perfectly still from the waist up, just floating, was completely unsettling. David and I were frozen. We didn't breathe. We didn't move. We were two guys who had come out here to escape the world, and now something from a nightmare was staring right back at us. This was the moment where my brain stopped working the way it should, where I started to open the first of many mental loops. Who is she? Why is she here? How is she just floating like that? She didn't move her arms. She didn't tread water. She just floated, letting the small waves she created wash over her. She had these eyes, huge and dark, that looked straight across the water, right at our boat. I felt like she wasn't looking at David or me individually, but at the space between us, at the air, at the boat itself. She was looking at the idea of us. And that's when I finally saw the truth. It wasn't just a girl who was drowning or playing a prank. The way she said, "Come to me," the way she was so unbothered by the night, by the cold, by being miles from anyone else. She wasn't stuck in the water. She was the water, or something that belonged to it, something that lived beneath it. And she wasn't asking us to come out of the water with her. She was asking us to come into it. David was frantically paddling now, his breath coming in short, harsh gasps. The water resisted every single stroke. It was like paddling through cold, thick oil. We were barely moving, maybe a few inches. The psychological pressure in the boat was immense, this horrible growing silence that was only broken by David's ragged breathing and the faint, sweet sound of her voice echoing in the background. "Come back to me." That was the line that changed everything. Come back. She said it as if we were already hers, as if we had run away from her before. It wasn't a request anymore. It was a demand, laced with a terrible possessive hunger. It felt like this wasn't a random encounter, but a specific calling. She didn't want someone in the water. She wanted us. David's face, pale in the moonlight, was pure terror. He didn't look at me. He just paddled, his muscles straining. And then, as if she realized her soft, pretty voice wasn't working, as if she got tired of waiting for her prey, the woman's expression completely dropped. The smile vanished, replaced by a look of sheer black rage. And she shrieked. It wasn't a scream. A scream is human. This was a shriek, a raw, piercing sound that cut through the night and bounced off the trees with an unholy clarity. It sounded like 1,000 broken plates, like metal tearing apart, like every single fear I'd ever had being given a voice right next to my ear. It physically hurt. It made my head pound instantly and my ears felt like they were going to bleed. The world went silent for a second after that shriek, and then the air was just filled with the fading echo. And The water reacted. Where before it had been stubbornly slow, it now turned violent. The ripples she had made became sudden, harsh waves that slammed against the side of our little rowboat. We were rocking wildly, and David dropped the paddle this time. It clattered to the floor, and he just scrambled to grab the oars, his hands shaking so badly he could barely get them into the locks. The woman on the far side was gone. Not slowly sinking, but just gone. 1 second she was there, a pillar of pale flesh and soaked white cloth, and the next, the surface of the lake was unbroken black glass again. Only the violent rocking of our boat and the still ringing echo of the shriek proved she had ever been there at all. David didn't say a word. He just started rowing, not paddling, but rowing, with a desperate animal strength I had never seen in him. He was putting his entire body into it, pulling those oars until the boat was tearing through the water, cutting a straight line back to the gravel patch where we had launched. I turned around to look at the far shore. Nothing. Total, absolute darkness.
And then, as we were rowing away, I heard it again. Not the shriek, not the voice of the wind chimes. This was different. It was a faint, low sound just under the waves we were making with the oars. It was like a voice that was both sad and angry, whispering directly into the water, and the water was carrying it straight to us. It was saying the same thing, just a single repeated word: mine. It was a possessive whisper, a sound that spoke of territory and ownership. It didn't belong to the air, it belonged to the depth. It followed us until the keel of the boat scraped against the gravel shore, a sound of grating rock that was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. We practically tumbled out of the boat. We didn't bother with the fishing gear, the six-pack, or the old tin of bait. None of that mattered. We just ran up the small hill to the pickup, David fumbling the key into the ignition, his hands still shaking so badly that the whole dashboard rattled. The engine roared to life, and he slammed it into reverse, then into drive, spinning gravel as he tore out of that tiny parking spot and onto the dirt road. We didn't look back. We didn't talk. We drove 10 miles down that narrow road, hitting bumps and nearly taking out a mailbox before we finally reached the main highway and the comforting, ugly glare of streetlights. David finally pulled over, his body slumped over the steering wheel, his breath still ragged. Did you see her eyes?" he managed, his voice a dry, thin rasp. I just nodded, unable to speak. His eyes were wide, staring at something that wasn't there. We sat there for another 5 minutes, 2 grown men who felt like scared kids, the adrenaline finally wearing off and leaving behind the icy chill of absolute dread. We had gone out to fish in our sanctuary, and we had almost become a part of the lake's dark secret.
We never went back to North Shore Lake together. We told ourselves that we had seen a ghost or maybe some local lunatic playing a terrifying prank, but deep down we knew that wasn't it. A ghost wouldn't make the water fight you. A lunatic wouldn't vanish without a ripple. The immediate aftermath was rough. For a few weeks, we both felt like we could still hear her, especially when we were near any kind of running water. Every shower, every faucet, the sound of the toilet flushing, it all carried a faint whispering echo of that one possessive word. David actually moved away 6 months later. He couldn't stand being so close to a place that held that kind of memory, that kind of open wound. He wanted to put 1,000 miles between himself and that cold black water. I stayed. I couldn't move. I felt like I had to be here, like I was tethered to this place, to this secret. And that brings us to now, years later. I still fish. I still go out to lakes, but never North Shore. I stick to the well-known places, the ones with docks, signs, and other people around. I need the safety of crowds and noise.
But sometimes when I'm out there, alone, just me and the quiet lapping of the water against the boat, the feeling starts to creep in. The air gets still. The temperature drops just a little too fast. And I'll see a ripple. Just one slow, deliberate ring of movement on the surface. And it doesn't matter how far I am from North Shore Lake. It doesn't matter how many years have passed or how much I tell myself it was just a hallucination, a shared nightmare. When that ripple hits the boat and the sound of the water settles, I can swear under the gentle, normal lapping of the waves, I hear a voice. It's not the sweet sound of wind chimes, and it's not the ear-shattering shriek. It's that final, low, possessive whisper that belongs only to the deep, cold blackness of the water. Mine. And I know with a chilling certainty that settles deep in my bones that somewhere beneath the surface of a secluded lake, the woman is still waiting. She is still hungry, and she is waiting for me to finally fulfill her demand, to come back to her. She's out there, still listening.